Hi, it's Mrs. Big Bird, Debbie Spinney, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it.
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy here with us, thank you for joining. As always, I'm your host, Jake Duffenbaugh. With me today, as always, our co-host, Chris Bixby. How's it going?
Doing great. Hello, everyone. How are you, Jake?
Doing great as always, Chris. Thank you for asking. And yes, as you kind of already tell about this episode is it was such a fun chat indeed, and a lot of things that this guest today done a lot of wonderful things that you sure might know mostly know about, and wonderful chat. I'm not wasting any of my time. Chris, what do we have for today?
Today we had the great pleasure of speaking with someone who has been a part of an iconic children's series practically almost since its beginning. We're talking about Dick Maitland. Dick Maitland has been the sound effects director and Foley artist on Sesame Street since 1970, during when the show began. Dick has created some of the most recognizable sound effects on the show, including Cookie Monster's cookie eating noises, whenever Oscar opens and closes his trash can, many, many others. He is also best known as the squeaky voice of Oscar's pet worm, Slimy. We discussed Dick's several decades working for Sesame, his other sound effects work in children's television, working as a live sweetener for various televised events, and more. Enjoy it.
Yeah, see you then. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive.
Yes, today we're very pleased to have with us Dick Maitland. Dick, happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yes, delighted to have you
Of
here.
course.
Yes, so to kick this off, could you tell our audience, I guess, a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, I'm the sound effects director of Sesame Street, and I have been so for the last half a century, which is scary when you think about it, but that's the truth. This is season 56 we're starting this year, and I've been there since the beginning. And Jim Henson was a friend of mine, and we started the show together back in 1969. I was not the first person on Sesame Street. They had another guy that was on Captain Kangaroo they brought over, but he wasn't feeling well, and they brought me in at the middle of that year, but we gave him credit for the first year. So I actually started in 1970.
Nice.
My career.
Nice.
Awesome. So, I'm kind of curious, what was your, before getting to start, working professionally in sound effects and all that, what was your childhood like? Can kind of talk about like, did you like, did you always want to get to work in sound effects in some way?
I didn't really think about. I was always interested in sound. I just was naturally interested in sound. I loved to listen to sounds and making sounds, and I built my first Heath kit and could make sounds with that, and get into doing all stuff. And I used to have my own little puppet show when I was a kid. We used to take light bulbs and dress them up as cartoon characters and put on shows for the adults. And so my first character is a light bulb, and I put sound effects, make funny noises, and put squeaky, make noises as if they were light bulbs. So I started puppetry sort of really early, and then I got into Hofstra University, and I built a radio station there, WVHC, which is now what's now called VHC, but it was a carrier current station, and I built it from scratch. And I used to do radio shows there. I used to do The Pit and the Pendulum, and I create all the sound effects to put in there from scratch from old 78 RPM records and whatever we had around. So I was interested in doing radio sound effects. I was always fascinated by it. And I used to listen to the Lone Ranger when I was a kid, when I was growing up in the radio. And so you get sort of into it, and that's what I did.
Nice. So now, what was your first sound effects job?
The first sound effects job I actually had was at ABC, believe it or not. I was working in ABC News during right after the Kennedy assassination. And I was a desk assistant across the street in the basement of ABC News, and I was part of it. And then later on, I got to know one of the sound effects artists that was part of the show. Back in those days, they didn't have sound. Everything was MOS or mid-out sound, we used to call it. And we used to put sound effects in with 70 RPM records, and the sound effects artists had a turntable, and I'd watch them do it. They put all the sound effects and the news things to make sort of bring it to life. And the rationale was it's entertainment. It's not really news per se, so we could do it. We could fake sound and make it. So we did a lot of Vietnam stuff during those days. And anytime there's a big fire story, would have some kind of background, so as if to give it some life. And so it sort of make it sort of like real. And that's when I began doing this stuff. And I guess the first real sound effect I did on that show was actually that was the first stuff I did. You know, putting little background noises in all the news shows to think about it. But then I went to ABC and we started working with some of the old sound effects artists. And it just one thing led to another. You do go from one show to another. But then Dark Shadows came up and I started working on that. And there was a ton of sound effects on that show, believe it or not. And again, it was old time sound effects, live Foley props. I got used to doing a lot of live Foley props, and then 78 RPM records. So I got into it that way. And you learn all the different. So I memorized all the sound effects LPs and albums because you had to go right to it and get to it. You know, so that's what I did.
Nice.
Wonderful. So now I want to kind of talk about with your work in the laser tracks. Of course, you got to kind of like founded that. So like, can you kind of like what that whole like kind of came about, and can you kind of like talk about like the type of work that laser tracks does?
Laser tracks was part of when I started doing. I was selling electronic equipment, and so I had a company that I had a contract to sell audio consoles, and a lot of other things. And I used to work with a friend of mine named Bruce Martin, who had a company called Martin Audio, and we would both sell stuff to the New York market. But I was still doing Sesame Street, and a lot of the other shows that Sesame Street they grew into. So, but eventually I ended up just doing that full time. And I got out of the sales thing and I was just doing sound effects full time. I was also doing live sweetening shows where I'd go off with IBM into the hinterland in Florida and we'd do live sweetening to those shows, which was live mixing and then live audience applause and stuff, which is how I first met the Muppets. Most people don't know that the Muppets didn't start on Sesame Street. They started many, many years ago when when Jim Henson was doing the IBM shows, and they've had all these little bits. They call them the coffee break shows, and that's where sound effects.
Yep.
And that's how I got to know them all.
Yeah, and also with Sam and Friends too.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so now of course, you're best known as the sound effects director and Foley artist for Sesame Street. Can you kind of talk about how you landed that job?
Well, literally, I was working at ABC one sunny afternoon in 1968, and then I got this call to go down to Reeves Teletape, which was down the corner, and the old timers, that's some stupid kid show. You go down, send the kid down there. So they sent me down. I walked into the studio and I met Joan Cooney, and she was sitting there in the control room, and
that's great.
two other people, and they said, "What do you got?" I said, "We got this show we're going to do, and we got this thing we want to do. We have a song called Windy, and we need sound effects." I said, "Okay, well, I don't have any equipment here. I'll go out and do what I can for you because I don't, we don't have anything. I don't have anything here." So I went out to the studio and I met Jim and Frank Oz and all the guys, and they said, "We just need a crash when he flies off the set. We want to hear a crash, and to make it silly, and that'll be the show." So I didn't know what to do. So they said, "What kind of crash?" "Yeah, something stupid, big and crash." So I got a hold of the stagehands. They all knew me. I said, "Hey, guys, grab me a bunch of stuff that I can make a pile of and knock it over." And all of a sudden, so we built this pile of garbage in the middle of the studio in TV 19. And then we waited and I did my cue and I threw myself into the crash and stuff around. Then I saved a tin can for the end, dunk, 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 the last rattle. And they stopped taping. Everybody started laughing. They said, that was just great. That's exactly what we wanted. But we've got to do it again. Oh man. So the stagehands were all laughing. So we built another
Mhm.
pile again. So we did the whole thing, and I threw myself into a crash boom bag, and I threw the can rattle. And I realized the cameras are all on me. They had set this whole thing up to record me doing this stupid sound effect of me throwing myself into
Oh
the
gosh.
Oh
so
wow.
so then I came out and Joan Gans Cooney said, "You're the guy for us. We're hiring another guy, but I want to keep you in mind." I said, "Sure, whatever." And 6 months later, the phone call came. They said, "We want you." And so that's how I got the job. And I basically never looked back.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's wonderful. I know you kind of like touch base a tiny bit of that part, but I want to ask because you got to start working Sesame way back when it's during of course since of course early days. So can you kind of talk about like can you kind of share like any memories from working on Sesame like during its
Oh,
early
sure.
days? So that makes any sense?
Well, we all worked in the studio during the taping days. We used to do, don't forget, Sesame Street, used to do 140 shows.
Right.
And that was,
Yeah.
you got to remember, technology was not like it is today. We did it on 2-inch tape. And then they would have to edit the 2-inch tape. And the way you edit 2-inch tape is you had to put a special liquid on so you could see the control track and edit the control track together. That's how you edit a 2-inch tape. And that's how the show is put together. And then as we got forward and we got to 1-inch tape, we could do post-production. And there's a guy named Bob Emmerich that did all the post-production. And we had a room next to each other. I had my sound effects room. He had his editing. And I just walked back and forth giving him sound effects where it was missed or had to be added. And so that's how we sort of got into doing it all in post-production. But it was still done mostly live. And it was mostly done to live action. And I have to get out of the set, would have scripts, would write the sound effects into the script, and I would perform the sound effects on an emulator E2 or do it live, and footsteps were created. And that's how the whole thing of footsteps came in, because Jim Henson had the characters floating around in the air like this. And they weren't grounded. So he wanted them grounded. So he said, let's find a way to do that. And so I said, well, work something out. And so we did about the next day, we did a bit with and he came across the floor in what he wanted, squishy footsteps. So just make some note to I want squishy footsteps. So I just did it live, which is easy to do. It's a tub of water with dishwasher, and you put soap in it, and then put towels in it, so it's all squishy. And I squished him across the stage. He got halfway across the stage, and he stopped. He turned around and says, "Is Maitland doing that?" He said, "Go find out how he." And he sent 2 people over to find out how he was doing it. And from that day on, he says, "We're all going to do footsteps. I want the Muppets to be grounded." So all the Muppets now have footsteps. And the reason that he wants them grounded because it's real for the 4-year-olds. If they don't hear footsteps, the kids don't think it's real. So it's all about reality for a 4-year-old. And so
Exactly.
that's where my mindset
Yeah.
usually is right there.
Nice.
Wonderful.
So now what was it like getting to work with the original kind of Muppeteer team, like Jim and Frank and
Well,
Carol?
they all loved what I did, and because it made them look good, it made their jobs easier, and there'd be a lot of interaction. They'd do something stupid. They say, "No, go over here. It's the Dick. I want to hear. I want to bump into this or bang into that. I want to hear something silly." And they would ask for stuff for me to do. So half the time the directors would just say whatever they want, because they were the gods, and they call a lot of the shots. So a lot of it was impromptu. The first 20, 30 years, almost all of it was impromptu.
No, that's wonderful.
That's great. Um, you know, can I kind of like kind of actually perfect transition, for you getting into, working with the original Muppeteer team, like we're just talking about, now also like getting to working with the original human cast.
Well, the human cast was because we had a whole human cast, and we had Hooper's store. We had Mr. Hooper, who's the radical.
Rest his soul.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was the radical leftist, and everybody looked the other way. And so we were always doing sound effects of Hooper's door. I had a door. There was Hooper's door opening and closing. So there were always doors opening and closing and going back and forth. And the important thing was that it seemed real for the kids. Oscar's can opening and closing. You know, all the stuff that you remember, you actually remember this stuff because those sound effects are in your head because you watched it all. And it seemed real to you at the time you were watching it. But we did all that so you would think it was real. And that was part of what we did. And so, and each individual character, like all of a sudden the Count, we decided to put him in leather shoes. And then we had the who else was in the leather shoes? Grover. We put Grover in leather shoes because he would do walking steps and go and they would count the steps and you wanted to hear the steps. And so almost all the Muppets had steps unless you saw them without shoes, and then we didn't do it. So there was always an assumption because they didn't want the kids to think they could walk around without shoes on. The parents used to complain. So we gave them all footsteps. And there was sneakers and soft heel shoes and all kinds of sneakers. And I have feet that I use. One down here, I'll pull out for you. I've actually got my original Big Bird feet, this is what it looks like.
Oh wow.
Gosh.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I pat around in that to make, because you don't normally hear Big Bird, but when he's walking quietly and they want to hear something so the kids can see that he's heavy and he's walking. He's a 400-pound bird. You know, he's got some weight on
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
him.
Yeah, and since it's been a couple years since we lost him, I gotta ask, what was it like working with Bob McGrath and Emilio Delgado?
Well, Bob McGrath was, of course, a saint, and he was
yes.
exceptional. He had an exceptional memory, and he was what you saw. He was the real deal, and he sort of held the show together with Maria, the original Maria, Sonia Manzano.
Sonia, yeah, she's wonderful.
And so you have all these original characters that populated the street, and they would interact with all the puppets, and they would have all kinds of puppets you don't see anymore. We had penguins, we had monkeys, we had Cat Snuffleupagus we had, and there was a horse. We had a horse running around, and all these things had footsteps. And the horses still use coconut shells. Believe it or not, we use coconut shells for the horse because it sounded stupid. and also gave him, he'd move his butt here, clack, clack, clack. So the kids knew that the horse was moving. So it's what we call it is larger than life. We made Sesame Street just a little bit larger than life for the 4-year-olds, so they could tune into it and think it was real and believe the message they were getting.
Mhm. And what about Emilio Delgado? What was it like working with him?
He especially was wonderful. He had he did a lot of things that most people didn't give him credit for. He was very, very good at being the second character and stuff. And sometimes when you're being the second character as opposed to the primary, it's a bit of a difficult. You're not the primary, you're the. But he would just back people up. He'd do 2 or 3 takes just to get it right. He was just exceptional actor.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
yeah, yeah. Rest their souls. Their legacy still lives on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And you can still watch the old episodes. Don't forget we've done 4,700 episodes. So.
I know, exactly. Yeah. So that's actually a perfect transition, with so many changes, Sesame Street's gone through over, so many years. What are your thoughts about how Sesame Street has, kind of evolved over so many years?
How it has evolved?
Yeah, what are your thoughts about how it's like changed over so many
Well, over the
years?
years, first it was just a kid show, and it was rather crude and rude, and we did all stuff. We used to throw bowling balls into the garbage can to chase the chickens around. And so we had a lot of fun, silly fun and stuff like that. And then it got more educational, and then they became more sensitive to the needs of the parents and what they wanted to hear. Until today, we have all this the 3 listen effects. I wonder. Let's think about it. Let's try.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's all the new material, and that they rotate through the show as a way of adding to the teaching thing, but getting kids to think about how they could do it. They want the kids to think about stuff and use their imagination.
Absolutely.
That's the pathway that they're using these days. So it's basically a different show, because you don't see a lot of the old characters and a lot of the silly stuff. It's a half hour. We used to do an hour show.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And so they started cutting it down when PBS cut it down. First, it was 54 shows, then it was 26 shows. And then we cut it down one year and they wanted to do 25 shows, and we had a big meeting. And then the head writer at the time, God rest his soul, rose his hand. He says, "What letter of the alphabet you want me to fire?" Because they didn't, it's okay. Jim, what? Okay, we'll do 26 shows.
Mhm.
So they wouldn't have to fire a letter of the alphabet.
Right, yeah.
Well, this sometimes is where you get the creative side versus the management side. They sort of, they're trying to do their thing and you're doing your thing, and sometimes you gotta, the guys, we gotta get back on track together. We gotta stay together on this.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I know like there's I mean there were there's I know there were like so many, changes, how how where because I know, people I know like how we grew up, it was kind of it was like more like how Sesame like was how has that charm, but I mean though I mean of course we still like how the show is, with the new audience and all, which is great, but sometimes it's just like like it'd be great if we can still watch in that some sort of charm. I mean, of course, I mean it was great for like recently, like um, like characters coming back like Barkley and there's going to be like a
I
episode like coming that's going to be
well,
related to Big Bird
I
and Snuffy, and so it's so it's kind of great to kind
listen,
of we can still see so that
they took the Count's thunder away, and I went on the warpath. And to every person over there, and I went to the workshop and I said, "Why did you take the thunder away?" Well, it's scary to get. Thunder is not scary; it's part of reality. It says that rain is probably coming. You don't want to get off the street if you hit thunder. And it took me a year to get them to put the thunder back in. So,
oh my God.
no. So, but again, these are different. And Sesame Street, we call this differing perspectives. So there's a name for
Right.
this.
Right, yeah.
And so there's always a push and a pull of all these different elements. With a shorter show, they don't have the latitude to do what we used to do. If we get another funder, perhaps who can get us back up to a longer show, and we can put it back. But the world has changed around Sesame Street as well. The world is different than the Sesame Street you guys grew up in, and it's hard for kids to relate to that in our particular format sometimes. So you're trying to keep it and keep it focused on that, keep the 4-year-olds interested, because there's so much they watch Bluey now. The Bluey's on. I watched it, looked at the other channel the other day. Bluey's on back to back, like 12.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so they're not competing with that, and they can't compete because because they maybe not doing what they want to do. So that's part of our growing up period and readapting to what's going on in the future. Well, we did go for season 56, and there's going to be some fun stuff we're going to do, and we got some new material we've added, which are these giant characters. It's called Mega. The Mega characters have been added, and that's
Right.
great
Yeah.
for kids. And so we're doing some material as we go forward, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. I plan to do this for another 3 or 4 years if I can, and stay with it, because I can still do what I can still do what I do. I can still reach over here and do my funny noises. So as long as I can do that, it's going to be fun. And then I can also go over here, and I can just switch my button over here, and I can. I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go open up a thing so you can hear what we do so well over here. Where are we? Here we are. Okay, all right, come back. I'm going to give you okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now,
Oh, that's
Oh
awesome.
wow.
That's
okay,
great.
so
Cool.
that's basically a DSP, a modified DSP 7000, which is it's a pitch shifter, and I had it modified by the guy that built the thing out and who's from Italy to clear all the bottom end out. So it's very, very clear. When I do this live, it's nice and crystal clear and it sounds like a worm. So that's what we do.
It's nice. And
In terms of doing how we do with the actors, when we're doing live stuff in the
That's
set,
awesome.
I'm up in a booth doing it live with the voice, and Marty's on the set doing his character, and then the guy that's doing
Marty, yeah, he's wonderful.
oh, Marty he's amazing, and so he does the worm,
Great friend.
those sticks, and so we got our act together, and then but now he's a worm with attitude. So we're in the set, and now he backs up Oscar the Grouch. Yeah, why don't you beat it? Leave us alone, And we do it in the slimy voice, which it cracks up most of the studio. And I'm sure and if the guys in the studio laughing, the kids are laughing. But there's not a lot of time to get away with that when you're in a teaching stance.
right.
Yeah.
And going back to newer Sesame Street a bit, of course I also love some of the newer characters they've added, like Ji Young and Tamir and Gabrielle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys are
Well, the
awesome.
original the original Gabrielle that we had on Sesame Street, when Sonia had a baby, that
Yeah,
was my son.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
bought a baby girl, and he slept through the first shot, so that was funny. But he used to then hate being reminded of it growing up until he got to college, and then all of a sudden the ladies seemed to like that he was baby Gabrielle on Sesame Street. So now he's real proud of it.
No, that's funny.
He still gets she and my wife still get like a 50 cent or $1 fee from every couple of years from the shows being played back so often.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tamir and Ji Young, yeah, they're wonderful new Muppets.
Some of the newer characters are going over very well, and I think it's great to have them because we're such a we're the first Rainbow Coalition TV show. We had every color of the rainbow on the show, and everybody was treated the same. And so now it's even better because we have new people that are actually immigrants that are coming on the show, which is what you're saying about. And I think it's great to let me kill this. Something showed up. I think it's great to have those new members, and they fill in a lot of the character spaces, which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I mean, to have like new characters to keep that diversity, going, which is always,
Yeah,
a gift.
we didn't need DEI. We were the original Rainbow Coalition, so
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of
absolutely.
course. So, now I'm kind of curious. Of course, there are so many, Sesame Street made, so many episodes over the years. But of course, if you of course remember some of them, which of course I probably might do. Now do you have any Sesame episodes that you've done sound effects for throughout the years that kind of stick out to you as some of your favorites?
well, I was going to write down a list of them, which I still may do and send you. But some of the ones that really stand out, where we sent Slimy the Worm, which was me, to the moon.
Oh yeah, it's a
Yeah,
classic.
Tony Bennett got to sing that. Yeah,
Slimy to the moon. He got to sing that song.
yeah, that was great.
Oscar decided he was gonna go to Hawaii with Snuffleup, I guess, and they ended up in Hawaii with a Hawaii show, and Snuffleup was
Right, yeah.
Ah, wow.
to the
Yeah.
bottom, and he decided to dig a hole, and he shows up in China, and so he
Mhm.
actually ended up with Oscar showing up in China. So that's how we did the China show with the Chinese people. So those are the really the ones that we stretched ourselves a lot. And then we've done we did all the other shows, the spin-off shows that we did, that they made movies of, or they do 1 hour specials, and there's a lot of that material. I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds of material to go over, and the
Yep.
characters are all spread through. The sole center of that whole galaxy was the 4-year-old. And if you ever watch any of them, you can actually almost hear the director directing toward the 4-year-old, even though
Right.
we talk to the children as grown-ups because you want to respect them. And but they're talking to them in language that a 4-year-old can grasp and understand. And so if you look at through that lens, a lot of the Sesame Street stuff we do make a lot more sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. With episodes wise, comes about with Slimy. Like I mean, it's kind of like a silly one where Slimy Slimy falls in love
Well,
with
Slimy,
Glowworm and
Slimy has a whole different world to himself, and
Mhm.
he don't forget he's not alone in the garbage can, because in the old days we had a whole menagerie in the garbage can. We had an elephant whose trunk would come up and talk, and he had a whale in his bathtub down there, and you'd hear the whale come up, and once in a while you'd see water sprout up from the whale and chase him out of the garbage can. So there's always been a lot of animal life in the garbage can, and there's a lot of levity in that. And then you can go to uh, the slimy characters in the can. We actually wrote a script that has not been produced yet, where Slimy is actually Oscar has a pet rock with a stick in it, and he can't get the stick out. And the only one that can get the stick out of the rock is Slimy. The Slimy reaches over, grabs the stick with his mouth, pulls it out, and magically he's got his own little world he can go into. So that's the magic. That's the stick in the stone that we're thinking about doing a show about. But those are the kind of things that we like. We're trying to get imagination back into it, you know?
Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course.
An episode that comes to mind for me in terms of like slimy focused episodes is the episode The Worm Winter Games where Tim McCarver guest stars and he presents like the opening ceremonies.
Yeah. And don't forget he did a car race,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
car racing. And so there have been plenty of uses for these sometimes the writers would just come up with these great bright ideas, apart from the teaching part of it. And don't forget a lot of the elements for the teaching part of it were done by Jim Henson. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are all
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
classic.
inserted elements of which Jim used to do. He got to do that because he used to do it for IBM. So it was an easy transition for Jim to have his people do that stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of things people don't know is that Kermit the Frog is actually named after Jim's best friend Kermit Love. And
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, Rest of Soul. Yeah. Kermit Love and
he came from these great dramas in opera, and that's how he came out. He was the guy that made all those puppets look real. There's an art to how those puppets look so real up close. You're on a one shot with Kermit, and he looks, and there's not a fur out of place on his head, and everything works perfectly, including his eyes that Elmo can get down and roll. There's a lot of manipulation in that hand there, and yeah, there's an art to that.
Yeah, and of course like there were some episodes where they celebrated Slimy's birthday
yeah,
party.
Slimy's birthday. Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are
the
always
Yeah.
fun.
it was a never-ending story with would come into these production meetings and get the scripts and say, okay, how are we going to do this? and, and, and the wardrobe guys we sit there saying, how are we going to do this? We have to build one. And so it was a constant cycle of building puppets and Muppets. So that's part of the whole process. There's an army. There's 75 of us. That's the Sesame Street Army.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now,
So the one where Slimy like goes to school, and like where one storyline where everybody misses Slimy, and like the one where like focus
Yeah.
on like the World Music Festival. Just like
And
wow.
then there was the night that Big Bird sat up on the roof waiting for Santa Claus. You remember that show?
right,
That
Christmas
was
Eve
a
on
long
Sesame
time ago.
Street.
Cruising on Sesame Street. That was such a great special. Like that we still watch traditionally. It's just like it
Yeah.
just yeah,
Yeah, but
and be
doing it
yeah.
was fun.
So,
Well, there's a great shot of Santa Claus showing up, and you see the shadow of Santa Claus showing up, looking over Big Bird. And the
right.
only guy that we could do it was the technical director because he was big and round and fat. So they put a hat on him, and he walked out big and fat. So the technical director, he hit the button and he walked out in the set. He did the shot walking up and being the shadow over Big Bird that day. So that was his one claim to fame. He got to be
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
he got
Yep.
he got to be Santa Claus.
Right, yeah. And the one is kind of like a appreciation day for worms in a way, which is kind of one of the like, recent episodes, which is called "Be Kind to Your Worm Day."
Yep, yep. I
Yeah.
mean, the fact that they can weave these characters into a storyline sometimes is quite unique. But sometimes I'm surprised they could do what they do.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh yeah.
especially with the Slimy goes to the moon thing that we already talked about, how that was kind of like kind of the recurring kind of like subplot of that season, season 29, where, like in some parts of the episodes, like they would show like clips of like, Slimy's trip to the moon and how that was kind of like the kind of like a recurring theme in that season.
Well, they had a whole season where they just love the idea of Slimy because the kids identified with him. They got a lot of positive reaction. They have a whole division of Sesame Street that does child testing, and they run these shows past the kids for attention and to see for interest. And that season, Slimy was a big hit, and they were right. They just wrote a bunch of scripts for him. Um, but the Slimy to the Moon thing, I was amazed they got him to do that to actually sing that song.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
he just said, "Let me go, let me do this." And a lot of the characters, when they come on the show, can't wait to get into and to be with the puppets and be seen them and have them be talked to. And of course, the other unique part of the puppetry is that when we sometimes they have live people in the studio, and the actors will sit there and they'll put Elmo on, and the kids are right up and they'll look at the guy's hand, and the kids are talking to the hand. They're not looking at they're not looking at the character. They're looking at the character and they're talking to the character. The person's right there doing the voice. Kids could not see that guy doesn't exist. They're talking to the cloth, and so
Right.
it's quite a unique thing to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Since we already kind of like touched base about like, now they are talking about episodes with Slimy. Now, can you kind of like talk about like the aspect you gain to, providing the voice for Slimy?
Well, it was kind of by accident. The they wanted a voice. Originally, Slimy didn't talk,
Right.
and they would just mumble words, and Marty would just mumble words. We would do words, but Marty had this gravelly voice, and so he said, "Well, let's get to do it up in the booth." So I got a microphone, and they say, and I'd sort of pitch my voice up, but it wasn't quite enough. So then I grabbed my 7500 and I said, "Well, let's try this." And so they would feed, they would feed the sound back up to me, and I would feed it and send it back down to him, but it didn't work. So they said, "Look, you do it." And so I just got on the microphone and did what I just showed you to do. I just pitched I go to a higher voice myself that makes it easy for the pitch shifter, and that became the voice of Slimy the Worm. But
Of course.
he didn't have words.
Exactly.
He just sort of garbled and mimicked, But then he had lines,
Yeah.
And there, some of the writers, and there was a couple of who wanted to have lines. They wanted him to be just a gobbly little worm. But then he started to have lines and he started to have attitude. And then that's when he got his voice full time.
That's
He sort of
great.
grew into his voice. That's what it
Yeah.
did.
That's great.
Yes. So now, after talking about like episodes and things like that, of course, another good uh part of Sesame is all the songs and all the music that comes out of it. What have been some of your favorite songs to work on?
Well, outside of Slimy to the Worm, Slimy to the Moon, the original songs that were done were done by Joe Raposo, and
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
he
such a
would
talented like
he literally
Russell Soul too.
he and this old time mixer down in Midtown, and they would go to the studio, and they had this old piano, and they would just throw this stuff together with about four or five different guys, and that's how the songs all became. They were more like they start off as melodies, then they turn into a song, and the song had a reason or a raison d'etre to the script. And uh, but then they became as when those guys left and the new guys came in, then we kept it going. Would literally sit down and work out uh, melodies together. So we said, "What do you want to do here?" Well, I can do a boing there. I can pitch the boings up, and so would add the sound effects to the songs. So there was a coordination between the music guys and the songs. So the songs added sound effects to them to give them a little bit of non-musical depth, which we still do today. The
Right.
uh, the head musician is very good, and the guy that writes the music is a genius. And so what we do is when we have a song, they'll do it to the script, and then we will sit down and we'll work out what part I can add to it, or I send in the parts that I added to it. And so it becomes a joint effort. So it is always a teamwork thing,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to silly noises.
Yeah.
I excel at silly noises, and so I'll do a lot of student. I'll probably use about 100 different instruments over the years on Sesame Street to make silly noises and to make it rich and different every day for the kids.
Exactly.
If you can hit a boing, one boing, hit the boing.
Exactly.
Well, it's sort of that's the boing from before. But if you pitch it up or you spread the boings, then it's a new sound effect. And fortunately, your attention span of most 4-year-olds is rather limited, and so it's
Yeah.
you can get away with it as long as you just change it up a little. And they
Yeah,
do the
of
same thing
course.
to adapt.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of great composers over the years. Like one of our dearest
Yeah.
friends,
Oh,
because they've worked together on a lot of songs too. Chris Surf and Norman Stiles.
yeah. No, they're just the best. Like,
Well, did you
yeah.
did you interview them, Chris?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we've had them on a couple times.
they're so wonderful.
I went to look up some of the old episodes you've done because I want to see them, and I haven't had a
Thank you.
chance to log on. But I intend to go back and find all these guys because I'm dying to see what they had to say.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah, they're wonderful.
That's great. Yeah, wonderful names indeed.
Yeah, and of
The
course,
Sesame
the mu
ones.
and the music team now for what they're doing, like Bill Sherman and Paul Rudolph and Joe Feidler.
Yeah, they're great. They kind of keep going in that, charm for new audience.
Well, yeah,
It's great,
what they're dependent on the script on the producers and the script writers, and
Right.
that's where they get their cues. And but then what some of the guys do is they work with the actors to get them to sing in groups when they record them, and that's a whole art form. That's why some of those Muppet songs sound so great.
Oh yeah.
A great guy
Of
who
course.
knows how to work vocals and get them to sing in all these different pitches and to keep them on key and to choralize their voices, which is difficult to do, but the result is obvious. Even some of the recent songs that I've just seen, I said, boy, that sounds really good.
Yeah, and of
Oh yeah.
course, talking about, writers and head writers and also performers like Joey Mazzarino.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Joey was an interesting character because he had his own worldview, and he I loved a lot of the stuff he did. And but Joey left the show, and they moved on to somebody else. But some of the original stuff that he did is just phenomenal.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
especially in performing Murray and love Murray.
And Stinky and Ingrid and all those other
Yeah.
characters that he did.
Yeah,
Well,
and I also became director too, I
oh,
think.
Yeah.
Times, Joey is another
but it's
treasure, you know.
hard to produce the stuff sometimes when you go live because there's so much going on, and sometimes the day of production, if you don't have somebody from post production there saying, "No, wait a minute, that's not going to work because it's going to drown this out. It's not going to work." And so sometimes we make mistakes, and it's hard to fix. So we always have to fight to make sure that somebody's there that says, "No, stop, 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 stop. It's not going to work." And the director says, "Well, why?" So, well, he said, "Well, yeah, when you add 10 voices in the background and the sound effect of that tractor going by, you're not going to hear what the guy just said."
Oh
Oh,
my God.
Right, yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean, with going back to songs wise, for only a bit, um, I mean, I don't know if I was right on it, but like, I think there's a one that like Slimy like got to sing where like it's I think it was like a parody of Earth, Wind and Fire, which is called Earth, Wind and Mud, sung by Slimy.
we did those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then and Wiggly Worm song.
But I can't really sing, so I depend on my little knob here to be up and
Yeah.
down.
Right.
Well, why? Because the Slimy is just going to go high pitched no matter what. So it's like it's just kind of depends.
Getting Slimy's voice to follow the notes is sometimes a bit tricky.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, a lot of wonderful music, Sesame wise. So now I know we kind of talked a little bit, with Tony Bennett and all that, but what are some of your other like favorite celebrities that you got to work with on Sesame?
Well, there's been so many. I mean, when we did the Heidi Heidi Ho song and he showed up on the set, that was an extraordinary event on Sesame Street.
Right, yeah.
And then when we had actually Mr. Rogers came on the set, which was fun.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, where Big Bird and Mr. Rogers have that. I
And,
love that.
and of course
Such a pretty.
there was a they came out with a dollar with a pot. Says anybody uses bad language, you gotta put a dollar in the pot. So,
Oh my gosh.
so
Okay. Okay, I can
Yeah.
actually remember. Yeah, I remember there was like, yeah. Okay, that I do remember because there was a time that like, I don't know. It's been on YouTube for a while, so I can just say it. Where Elmo and Zoe like was doing a scene with one of the celebrities or something, and then like I forgot her name, but I think watching this, they might know what I'm talking about. Where she accidentally where she like accidentally like swear, and then like Elmo and Zoe be like, $5, nickel, because
Yeah.
she's, and then like Kevin when we did chat with Kevin, he's wonderful. Where like if every single time if every celebrity like accidentally swear, they had to get $1 in the jar, and then like and it turned out there's so many dollars on there, and the kids. It's oh, circle.
you got these, when Mr. Rogers came on, somebody walked up. He walked up. One of the stagehands walked up and said, "Here's $5. Go to hell." Oh, I didn't say what he actually said, but it was the whole studio cracked up. This was before he got there.
Oh
Oh
man.
gosh, that's cra- that's crazy.
Well, we've had some faux pas on the show.
Nice.
It's all been inadvertent and silly.
That's awesome.
Of course.
One of your questions here is Emmett Otter's jug band Christmas, and which we worked on, and that's one of Jim's films. that he was so proud of, and that's the one where they were rowing their canoe down the river. And the hardest part of that thing is he had to break something to make them happy, and we couldn't come up with the sound of what the sound was going to be. And we went round and round and round. And so we finally just used a big hand slap and a crack on top of it. Because sometimes a performer has an idea in their head and they can't really hear it clearly. And you try to, you're dancing around with different words, trying to drag it out of them. It's like, it's just like trying to get it out of them. And, but there was a pail. And so we had to break the pail, and that sound was a difficult one. We were never really happy with it, and sometimes we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Evan Jug Band Christmas Wonderful Special, and we recently
I love that. Yeah, I love that special. We'll have a DVD right there.
yeah, we recently
It's such a
spoke
great special.
with Jerry Nelson's wife Jan about that, and Jerry's work on that special. It's such a wonderful special.
Yeah, I remember like when we talked to Jan about that project. I remember like she told like, it was like one of those projects that Jerry, generally enjoyed doing, which just, just great, Like that special is just so wholesome.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
absolutely. So now in general, do you have like any favorite sounds that you got to make for Sesame Street?
Well, my favorite. Well, there's so many. I mean, in a half century of making stupid sounds, but I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed getting away with the simple things, and just little things like the boings. If I go and get some boings over here, so I can get some boings.
Hi there, Jake and Chris. This is Slimy the Worm, Oscar's best friend with attitude. These are some of Oscar's favorite sound effects.
So these are little trombone things. So, and you'll see a lot of these in the show now for reactions.
Right.
Because sometimes they'll say something stupid and they'll turn their head.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have heard all these things. and they accentuate the verbal, the physical action in the set. And so that it's also a clue to the kids. He's reacting to something. What? And so it's a question mark, And so you're leading the kids into how stupid it could be, Wow.
Yeah.
And so I get with the music department.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of like talked
Thank you.
kind of in a way a tiny bit with that aspect, but can you kind of like talk about, getting into like providing, the sound effects for the recurring segments? So I mean, like, what was that, getting to provide for those?
What do you want? What do you really want to know?
Like
About like the sound effects for the segments.
like for example, like Elmo's World and Elmo the Musical and things like that.
Well, this Elmo's World was a special group of things because there was a lot of sound effects in it, and a lot of it had to do with the music and music cues. There's a lot of stuff I just played for you, and then when you take time to do the post of it, I spend a lot of. I don't charge them for a lot. They don't really pay for all the time I spend because they send me the material and I get it here in my little laboratory here, and I get to play with it. And sometimes I can do it very fast. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days, or I'll go back and I'll change things up, or I'll play it and say, no, that doesn't work. And so you get to regurgitate and get it, and to get it up to the point where it's as good as you can get it. And then it goes to them, and then they get to have their 2 cents. And sometimes you want to change it. For example, we just did a show the other day, and the Elmo has a little stuffed toy that he talks to. And we decided, and it's sort of dead air, so I put a little toy squeak in it. And so the idea was that, so the word came back from the producers that, yeah, it's a good idea. We think but maybe that's not the squeak. So let's try a couple of different noises for the bear, for this little thing that he squeezes or talks to. So as if he's looking at his little toy, and the toy sort of in his imagination talking back to him. And so that's what I try to create. So that's I'll be doing that when I leave today. I'm going to be doing that because I want to send that over to Monday. They want to have some choices as to what that sound could possibly be. And I'll go through my extensive library, and then I can, with pitch shift, I've got almost an infinite variety of stuff I can do, and I keep adding to it. But I think I'll come up with something that's sort of like an imaginary. He's talking to him, and again, you can hear. I don't even know myself what I'm going to do this afternoon after I leave you, until I start listening to it, because that's when the magic happens.
Right.
I keep doing this because it's magic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cannot have enough magic.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And so I know that like there are a couple of times that the Sesame got to do like kind of later segment, like after like Almost World, or just kind of last part of the episode sometimes for like a couple of seasons, if I remember, we just called them the Adventures of Trash Gordon, where like we're Oscars like reading the story, like reading like story to Slimy Trash Gordon, and then like Slimy will usually say more,
Yeah,
but like,
or read, and wants Oscar to read the book to him.
yeah,
And then we did a lot of Super Grover, which is a fun episode. And so a lot of the Super stuff is hysterical because he never gets it right, but he's always there to help out, and he finally gets it right. And those were fun episodes to do, because again, it's Sesame Street, but on a side issue. And there's so many of those we did that I wish we had more time. I didn't have enough time to prepare this for you. I would have gone through it all and made some notes on it. I didn't have a chance to do that, which I apologize for. But anyway, and some of those Super Grover events were spectacular because it was so silly, and we get to fly him in and fly him up to the sky and fly him along, and then he would always show up, and he would always land with a body fall.
Exactly.
I criticized the producer. How did he survive that body fall? Because they say he always says, and that's how he survives the body fall. You always find that when somebody goes off to the left and crashes. That's to save the sanity of the children.
Of the Adventures of Superworm.
Gosh, I don't even remember that one.
That's a while back, so it's like
it's a while back, so it's like
I don't remember Superworm. I really don't. That's something we could have done. Don't forget, we do a lot of stuff that I don't get involved in, and so that.
Really? Okay.
I really
gotcha.
don't remember.
Makes sense. Yes, absolutely. So now, what was it like providing sound effects for the Sesame Street home videos?
Well, the home videos were a lot easier to do. They're pretty straightforward.
And they were shorter too. Like most of the home videos, I think for a while they were like only a half hour long.
Yeah, it was short, and then it was just there's always the street noise that goes in all these things, but they have that in post, and they put it as 5.1 street noise, because everything we do apparently goes to somebody who has to have 5.1, so we give them a 5.1 street noise to surround Sesame Street stuff, and then everything else is stereo. And the fun part of that stuff is they're very straightforward. They're usually very simple. They're unlike the street stories where you're doing live and you're you're making the stuff as you go along with the puppeteers. You know, they're very scripted and very straightforward.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a video that was evolved the Slimy that we're just I think yeah we're just called like the Slimy's World Games.
Slimy's, well, yeah,
Slimy, Slimy's World Games. Yeah.
we did Slimy's. Well, we did the World Games, and we did the car racing, and then we did
Yeah, there talking about.
those are the three almost going to the moon, the car racing, and
Hmm.
uh, and then of course his wonderful when he jumps into the pool in Oscar's can. That's always hysterical.
Absolutely.
Because I get my
Oh man.
and he goes down and poosh, little splash.
Right.
Oh man. Oh, that's great. Um, so now I want to talk about like with of course you got to being sound effects director for Sesame for so many years now. Now of course when we talk about your work doing aspects doing the home videos and songs and all of that we do, but can you kind of like talk about what a sound effects director like for you for example like does like how it all
Okay,
like can be.
if somebody gets to be there's a bunch of guys that do what I do. Usually they do a combination of sweetening and live sound effects because it's sort of a mindset. And what we normally do, we'll get some material and they'll say, what do you suggest? And so we'll look at the material and we start asking questions. The process of ask questions because you got to get into the mind of the producer, what they want to hear. Because you can go sideways really fast and give them something that's not what they want, and then you waste a lot of time. So I save a lot of time by just going into them and being very smart about the question. Most people have a general idea what they want, but they don't know how to ask themselves the right questions. So I give them that format. And most sound effects guys do that. They'll find out what the platform is, what do you want, and then you get to the specifics. You want this to be cartoony or just a little sort of backslapping stuff, or what's the range that you want to get into, and pretty soon you narrow it down to what they really want, and then it becomes a little easier to put all the simple stuff in. Do you want footsteps? Do you want to have cars going by? Do you have airplanes going by? I mean, Sesame Street used to have a whole menagerie of buses going off and cars going by and horns tooting and things going, but they've eliminated all that to simplify the things. And of course, it was a longer format.
Right.
But those are the questions you have to ask to get to where somebody who's producing this stuff says, okay, that's what I want. I think that's what I want. If you get them to the point where they think that's what you want, that's close enough to go do something for them and give them some samples. Otherwise, you can be wasting your time or wasting their time. That's more of the point.
Right.
Right.
So you also provided sound effects for this is kind of, I guess, a deep cut in a way. The One World, One Sky Big Bird's Adventure show, the planetarium show.
That was in China.
Yeah. Well,
We did that was done. We did that, and it was we went to have a meeting with those people. We went to Chicago, and to see what they have there, and they wanted to have the sound. They wanted to have the characters walking around the dome. And
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah.
hmm
Right.
I said you're good. I said I assume you got 5.1, and they said why? Because you're going to have these characters walking around. You're going to want the footsteps to follow them. He said so that's got to be done with 5.1. So I'll create the effects and I'll lay them out, but then you got to slide them in 360 to do that. And that was actually went to China and opened up the Peking Planetarium, that show. With the character with Cookie Monster and those guys going around, and there was some eating and a bunch of silly stuff that got projected on the ceiling. We had a projection on the ceiling, and so they said that'll be easy. They said, what do you mean? I said, it's just 5 chords. What do you mean? I said, see that's the Big Dipper. How many stars are in the Big Dipper? So
Yeah, uh-huh.
I said
Right.
that's what those chords are. and I said, and I can provide those to you. So I ended up providing the chords for the Big Dipper for the planetarium in Peking.
There you go.
Uh,
Wow.
that's
Because
great.
what kind of sound could that be? I said, well, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I want to talk a tiny bit of that particular because, like, I'll mention a little bit because, like, so there's a time now, a lot of people like don't really know about it. But so like, well, I mean, in a way, people know about it. But there's a time that like when that whole project like kind of first came about, and then like, there was a time where like where the whole like project like kind of first came about, and then time where it was like kind of like where it's showing like varieties of like elementary schools and all that. I was when that actually did happen, like luckily, like it was like probably like around like third grade or fourth grade. I think it might be third grade. I'm not too. I mean, I don't remember, but there's a time that I actually did got to see that show at my local elementary school. So I actually did got to see it.
You have to see the one in the round. Oh yeah. Well, they
Yeah,
did
Yeah.
here.
yeah, exactly.
They
Same
did
because
the New York one.
one time we went on a class field trip to the Boston Museum of Science because Massachusetts is where I'm from, so they showed it there. And I remember we recently had Ken Diego on, and we talked to him about like kind of that whole thing about them bringing that to like schools and stuff. So it was kind of cool that they did that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember like when I because I still remember like watching it. It was like, oh my gosh, like seeing like Big Bird Elmo and Tyler Bunch's character on that, and like because I remember it was like, oh my gosh, actually because I remember it was like I was like so into it. I was like, what, like just looking at them, just it looks like they're telling like we're there with them. It's kind of have that magical side. So, and I remember I remember that one time I was like, oh, what was that Sesame Planet show that I remember watching? And then I finally went to YouTube. It's like, the one where what's going It's like, oh my gosh, it's that. So like I still
Yeah.
remember after all these years, it's like, oh my gosh, it's that. And I was like, I was so close to honestly probably almost like
And
tearing up because I still remember it so fondly that I just, I was like, I want to know what that is cup, and now I know. So there you go.
and
That's my story on that.
I remember sitting in Chicago, and I pointed up and I said, "You see that?" I said, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." The
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I still remember that. Yeah. That's crazy.
guy was the guy's looking.
That's
It
crazy.
never occurred to me. Oh man.
Yeah. A lot of fun indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, of course. So now, can you kind of like, since we already talked about so much with Sesame now with the other projects, can you kind of like talk about, getting to do sound effects for other, children's television workshop projects, like for example, starting off with the Electric Company?
Oh, we did Electric Company. We did 3-2-1 Contact, and we did the Math Show,
Yep,
and
Squirrel One TV. Yeah.
so we basically went through everything they did in the early days. I finally had to leave to do Sesame Street, so I hired somebody else to do the Math Show, and
Yeah.
that for a while. These are all shows that they were trying to throw. They were really getting creative and coming up with all these different shows because PBS was gobbling them up. But of course, that world is filled up with junk now, so it's kind of hard to compete. But in those days, shows like 3-2-1 Contact made a big difference because they sort of a quasi scientific approach to them, and I think it was fun because the sound effects you create for them, that's part of the translation to get attention, to get through to the listener. So you're actually part of the production process that way. You're looking at it, you know. And I could sell you a Boeing. I can reach up and give you 45 different Boeings.
Right.
I could
Yeah,
sell,
yeah,
then
of
you
course.
Right. Yeah.
tell me what's best. Because I might take the Boeing and stretch it out. I might I might play it backwards and forwards. I might do something with it to make it fit what you see. And that's the creative part of it, which is what I
Absolutely.
do, and that's what I do.
Definitely.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
as far as the shows, there's very few. Well, the other serious work I do is all the sweetening work. I do the work on the Tony Awards and the 4th of July show in Washington. We used to do shows in Washington at the for the Christmas show in Washington. These are live shows that I do sweetening for, and add sound effects to. For example, we had the Muppets come down to the 4th of July 2 years ago, and I was literally putting sound effects to the Muppets on the stage that we rehearsed while I was sweetening the show at the same time. So that's the same, but it's the same skill set. And at the end of the day, at the end of the 4th of July, there's always cannons that fire. These 4-inch cannons and one 5-inch cannon down at the bottom of the hill. And so, but they can't hear that because the orchestra is blasting, and if the orchestra is facing the back of that hill, so the sound comes right in the back of the orchestra and drowns every microphone. So what we do is we lower the whole sound of the orchestra, and I play the cannons, the cannon shots specifically to picture. I see the cannon going off, I fire the cannon, so it sounds real. The people at home say, "Oh, that's a cannon shot." Now they're going to hear the ricochets that bounces around, the whole mall there. It bounces off all the buildings in a lot of echoes, and it comes in the back and washes over the band. But this way, you at least hear the band and you hear the cannons, and then you bring the band back up again. So you want to do it just for that, the 1812 overture finale with the cannons going off, and then you come back to the real orchestra, and that's called good production techniques.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So now I want to kind of talk a tiny bit about like with Muppets side of things. Now, of course, you got to work a little bit with them for like for some projects with them, like for example, for the Muppet Show, the Sex and Violence pilot and Muppet Meeting films. What was it like, getting like your aspect getting to work with,
Well,
with,
the Muppet
with
Muppet
Muppets
meeting
in some way.
films, the IBM films preceded all of this, and there was a guy named Howard Schwartz, Howard Schwartz, Howard Johnson, that did all the sound for that, and we'd go to the studio and create live sound effects that they would use in the Muppet films, which would then go to IBM up in Armonk, and then they play them back in the shows. And I'd be down in Florida doing the audio mix show, and I hear my sound effect coming back at the halftime and say, "Hey, man, I did that." But that's how it all started with the sound effects and the Muppets. And it was a lot of fun because Jim was very sticklish about the sound effects he wanted. He was he was something special with his ear for this kind of business. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
absolutely. So now we've also gotten to provide sound effects for other children's series, including Between the Lions. What was that like?
Well, Between the Lions was much more vocal, and again there was basic sound effects, basic noises, nothing that stood out. We didn't create any standout sound effects for those shows except the open and the close. All the effects for those.
Right.
And then some of the original Sesame Street shows, we create open and close shows, or the sound effects would be part of the theme song. But where we actually did sound effects, the Jim Henson stuff, like the Jug Band Christmas, where I actually did the sound of the water lapping and the rowing down the river, and then all the specific effects in that, the birds chirping, all the animal sounds that become part of it. That becomes the fun part of it. And we did a lot of those, and some of them I can't remember. We did so many of them. I mean, you can look up, and that's just, and a lot of stuff never ended up on IMDb.
Right, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
didn't qualify for IMDb.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's a hit or miss with IMDb.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of the golf shows were the best. I used to do the sound effects at ABC for the golf shows, and would actually be down in the basement of in a studio and be doing the golf show, and they have they want to hear the sound they didn't have microphones that could reach, but so we would take a stick and hit it for the golf club for the golf being hit, the ball being hit, and then drop the ball into a paper cup and rattle it for the ball going in the cup. And we would do this. We did this for years. And finally, somebody from BBC called. I think it was BBC called up. They wanted to know what kind of microphone we used for this. So, well, we used this special microphone that was created just for us by Sennheiser, who made the whole thing up. And so then we finally got a call from Sennheiser saying, by the way, that special microphone that we made for you, what was the model number again? We got caught. And so they said, we faked the whole thing. We were doing sound effects. It sounded real. So, but the CBS couldn't figure out how we were getting the sound of those things without some kind of special microphone because they couldn't get it. So we got away with it for years. Those are the fun things.
Right.
Of course, indeed. So now moving on to now with your work with Low and Plain Productions. Now, what's it like getting to do some shows? Getting to work for that company, for example, getting to do some shows including Oobi, Wonder Pets, and Third and Bird. What was that like?
Well, working for those people was fun. Oobi was really interesting because it was just a hand.
Yeah.
But they were so good at it that you could watch it and believe that those are real characters. I mean, it was so good.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Tim and Noel and Stephanie and Tyler.
Yeah.
Wonderful names on that show.
Do stuff is amazing, and some of the other shows were just minor things. We didn't need a lot of sound effects to sweeten up those shows, and so it became like a daily habit. They'd send me a tape, I put the sound effects in, they go back, they call up, they want an extra, blah blah blah, and that's what we do. We just kept grinding them out year after year, hundreds and hundreds of these things.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
again, I would go back through my libraries and I was trying to see in my libraries what sound effects that I still had, from all these old shows. But then I go back and I found the stuff that I used for NCAA and all the sweetening jobs. They were different.
Right. So now on the animation side of things, what was Maya and Miguel and Peg Plus Cat like?
Peg Plus Cat was interesting because we wanted to bring the characters alive, but we didn't do a lot of footsteps for that. We just sort of keep them alive with sort of standardized sound effects, and sometimes the cat would have some special sound effects. Again, there was never really anything unique about the stuff, except that we would fatten them up so they sounded full. But the fun part was just grinding them out, because once you get good at something, once you have a knack for it, and it started when I was a kid with the light bulb cartoon characters, and I just grew into it and kept on going, and here I am, 83 years later, and I'm still making funny noises for a stupid kid show that's going to go.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't believe it myself.
Yeah.
Right. So many that you got to do over years. That's completely fine.
I'm sat here sometimes and what am I doing here? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Right. I can imagine. Now what so you were talking about with Peck Plus Cat wise, what about Maya and Miguel? Was it kind of like the same thing? With your experience doing Peck?
They all became a category for me. And all these one-off shows. They were great for the producers loved them because they had their point of views in each of those things and they had their actions. But for me, it was just basic down and dirty, either Foley or specific sound effects. And I was building up my library over the years, collecting all these sound effects. So I was able to do better stuff and more as I got down the road. I was able to do better sound effects as my library was increasing. I had access. Excuse me. But I don't just do sound effects in my library. I do performance sound effects. when I reached over here and I've got my Kurtz files. And then I can go onto my plugins for Pro Tools, and then I can go to the inserts, and I've got all things that I've done recorded for the last 30, 40 years at Sesame Street. I've got them all recorded in a file that I can just go to and play them on the piano here. So I've got a lot of different sources besides just typing in. And if I could bring up the sound effect over here, and I'd say name a sound effect, and I could play it for you. Then you say, I want the sound of a rabbit jumping on grass. I'd have to pull up one of my other things and go find it, but I could do it for you. And so it's like I feel like an orchestra, like the guy's running an orchestra. I got all these different instruments that I can grab to and say, you play this, you play that, and you do that. And that's how I get to all the sound effects.
Right, and of course, like the sound effects for Cookie Monster's cookies, like when he's crunching the cookies.
Well,
Yeah.
I used to do that live. And in fact, I have a giant cookie that I have up here that I keep to remind myself of how many cookies I actually ate and how many potato chips I actually crunched. And without swallowing, it's hard to do. And so I finally came up with stuff that was sort of cartoony and that I recorded, and then I made into a thing that I could just play, because he does this particular munch, 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 and then a slurp, slurp, slurp. So those things I have sort of, but it's like the cookie eating.
Yeah.
3 or 4 different versions of that I play in, rather than do it. I mean, I've done it live so many times. I just, I had to vacuum the crumbs off the floor every day, and
Right, yeah.
it got messy, especially when you started doing water effects.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's great. So we've been talking so much with sound effects wise. Now you also got to working as a live sweetener. So now, what does like can you kind of like talk about what a sweetener like does, or what you expect
A live audio,
on that part?
an audio sweetener, it's actually a category in Local 100, and it's a stagehands union. And what you do is you go to a show and you supplement the audience, because what happens in the real world when you stand in front of an audience and you can talk, and the audience will react. And if there's nothing else going on, you can sweeten it up. You can watch them. You have a separate camera that you watch the audience, so you can watch them reacting. But if all of a sudden somebody gets a walk on, and now the music's playing, so now you got the music playing, and you can't hear the audience because it's washing out to the audience, so you can't open up the audience mics. So that's when the sweetener gets on top of that and sweetens the audience, and then slowly gets out as he fades back, as the music fades out, and the mixer brings the audience back up. So it's a mental alliance between the mixer and the sweetener to get around the music cues to make the show sound real, so the applause sounds the same every time. And that's the art of it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
There you go. So now, what was it like sweetening for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade?
Well, the Macy's parade was different because we had to provide 3 hours of background material. And so you had the crowds, and you had the crowds applauding, and you had the cheers and applauding, and they would do 3 different shows. They would do the aerial shots, and so they would have helicopter shots. And so we always had a helicopter that I could just bring up a fader, and there's a helicopter. If we saw it, I could play that. I had like 7 different channels of stereo stuff, and I could just bring it up depending on what I see on the show. And then I had a keyboard that I could do the applause for. When the applause when the dancers get through dancing, you'd hear them all applauding. And I had it muddied off because they're all wearing gloves. So how much applause can you really hear? Which was always fun, because I want to hear applause. I said they're wearing gloves. And they could tell them to take the gloves off. They would yell at them, the headphones. So in fact, there was a wonderful. I was just sweetening the show in Washington. The rainstorm came in, and so there was no lightning, so they let the show go on. They brought a tent out, and we had the Pointer Sisters on the stage, and I was sweetening it, and the audience was cheering, and they finally applauded, and somebody hit the button and said, "Hey, Maitland, how come they're all applauding and they're all holding umbrellas?" So I go, Oh, you cannot win.
Oh gosh.
Uh,
And of
no.
course, Sesame got to be appear on the parade for so many years and still doing it.
It's done by some West Coast people now.
Right.
Fly
Okay.
some,
Yeah.
they fly
Hmm.
some Wunderkind in, and he does the applause.
Gotcha. But yeah, no, I
Gotcha.
mean, well, watching the Macy's parade, I mean, talk about another, you know, like tradition and things like that. I mean, love watching it every year.
Well, the Fourth of July is the biggest one. That's an hour and a half of live, uh, a live award show, not award show, a live entertainment show in front of 100,000 people on the lawn of the audience, and you got to make that sound real. And and the reason I'm there is for the same reason, for the other reason. When the band is playing loud and they want to hear the reactions, and then you see they want to hear the clapping along, but the band is playing loud right there. There's no way you can hear anything in the audience. So what I do is I get over the top of that and just give a little hint to the audience to bring the audience into it. So it's not to try to fake it, but to give some reality to the people. You can see them clapping, and once in a while, I'll read it up. You can hear some people clapping, and then just to give them a sense that they're there and they're real. And that's what you do. That's what you sweeten it. You sweeten it up so it sounds real. So if you were standing there, you'd hear it. Of course, if you're standing there, all you hear is the music anyway. But when 100,000 people cheer, trust me, you can hear it. When they
Right.
Right.
come,
Exactly.
it was loud.
Exactly.
Definitely. So, since we're getting close to wrapping up, can you share anything that you're currently working on?
Well, I'm working on the in fact, when I finish this, I'm going to go back to the show I was working on and do those sound effects I told you about. We got to come up with some sound for that little puppet, that little Muppet song. But right now we're just finishing the sweetening part of Sesame Street. What we do, I sweeten the show live, and I go out to the studio and I provide the sound effects, and then they edit the show, and then in post production, then I send that, and then they put all the effects in. Then they send it again when they assemble the whole show. Sesame Street's an hour show is basically an hour long, 30-minute element. And so what we do is we go down, the audio guy and I, is when they edit all these elements together, they're disparate elements. Some of them elements don't go together very well. And so they'll leave a pause. And so my job is to, and we can Vince to do this, to go and to create creative elements so to sort of glue the elements together in a Sesame Street sort of way. So in fact, I just did two of them this morning for a show 26 and 27 from this year. And it's going through and then finding an element with a hole or something doesn't glue right. And so I go in and sweeten that. And I add the effects to it. And then when he comes in tomorrow, he'll take those and he'll lay them into the full show. And that's what we see on the air. So it'll be sweetened once by in the daytime with sound effects, and then post sweetened to glue it all together. So
Hmm.
that's a second level of sweetening that we do.
Gotcha. Definitely. So this last question that Jake's about to ask is a question we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead, Jake.
Go,
Thank you
Jake.
very much, Chris. Yes. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you as well, Dick. So, of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of on your own terms? How would you define the word nostalgia? What does nostalgia means to you?
Well, if you've lived long enough, as I unfortunately have, that nostalgia becomes very nice because you don't have the turmoil and the tossing and turning that we have today, these days. And so, when you think of nostalgia, you think of things the way they were, even though things were rough back then.
Hmm.
Going during
Yeah.
the World War, and things were tough. And I grew up squeezing a bag of butter to make that was butter rationing, and so you grew up doing that, and so you have a different perspective on what's going on today. So nostalgia means to me is when things were a little bit simpler. It seems to me these days that life has gotten seems to be like an order of magnitude more complicated and busy, and so I miss when things were simpler and the people weren't throwing things. The country is more divided now than it ever was, and I think that really is the difference. It's disheartening to me. So I think of the old days when we were all one country, we all fought the Japanese and we all did the same things, I mean, I crawled on my ground during the Vietnam War. So, that's when we were all one family, and we that's kind of nostalgia I'm thinking of.
Right.
Of course.
Very
That's
well
so great.
done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake and Chris.
Well, Dick, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a blast. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Okay, my pleasure.
Of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Enjoy.
And like, yeah. I'm looking forward what's next store for you, more things, more Sesame with stuff. And looking for what's more for you and keep up the great work that you've been doing. Thanks again, Dick.
As long as I can.
Nice. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Dick. Thanks again. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Glad I got to make this happen. Bye.
And it's goodbye from us as well. We absolutely enjoyed our time speaking with the wonderful Dick Maitland. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.